Today I'm going to be sharing 10 tips with you that can make your band better right now. When you're working with your beginning brass players to get them to form a correct embouchure, just have them draw a small dot in the middle of their palm, or they can just imagine one that's there, and then form their lips in such a way and blow and aim a thin stream of air right at that dot. And that will give them the embouchure shape that they need. Tip number 2. In teaching beginners clarinet embouchure, the fewest words you can use to explain, the better. One thing I learned from clarinetist Ray Chappa is if you can just have them firm up the middle of their upper lip, the rest of the embouchure takes care of itself. So simply have them go like this, firm up right there, and you've got everything formed the way it needs to be formed to have a good clarinet embouchure. Number 3. On saxophone, the articulation occurs when the tongue releases the reed, allowing the reed to vibrate again. Many of you have maybe had saxophone players who we considered hard tonguers. Sounds like their tongue is just whacking the reed to death, and when they get this burst of sound on every note. But the issue really is not the tongue, it's really more of the air. What's happening is when the tongue releases the reed, there's too much air going into the instrument in a very sudden burst, and therefore you get a burst of sound. And I think if you think about it, the tongue, it just comes off or it doesn't. There's no way that they're whacking that reed harder than in some cases than others. It's really the air that's entering in very much of a burst. So to correct that, work with the student on getting a very controlled, steady, consistent airstream, and I think you'll find that that'll clear up the tonguing issues that that particular student has. Tip number 4. Being a brass player, there's many concepts over the years that I've either taught incorrectly or maybe needed to refine some, and one of those is tonguing for woodwind instruments. Oftentimes it's real easy for us to say, put the tip of the tongue to tip of the reed. But on saxophone playing in particular, this can be kind of awkward because to get the tip of their tongue on the tip of the reed, they're having to pull the tongue, back into their mouth, which causes some amount of awkwardness. So it's really best to teach it in tonguing on the reed is to have tongue a little bit back on the tongue. Tip number 5. When you're teaching your brass players about instrument care, one important concept about oiling their valves. A lot of kids only oil their valves when things start sticking, but that's really too late. Some of the damage is done. The idea is to oil the valves so often that they never stick. Very similar concept to putting an oil in the car. The oil lubricates the engine and keeps things running smoothly, and that's the idea behind oiling valves, is to prevent wear and tear. Tip number 6. Try to keep instruction on breathing as simple as you can and avoid long physiological explanations. One very simple concept I use with my beginning bands in particular is I teach breathing as a process of suction, the idea of pulling air into your body. A lot of times I'll compare the process to the idea of a vacuum cleaner, and I'll kind of kid around with the kids a little bit and say, okay, pretend like you're a vacuum cleaner, and I'll just have them just pull the air in. One common playing problem many kids have is tone quality on staccato notes. One illustration I like to use is to pretend that you have a loaf of bread there. And there's varying thicknesses of that bread, but no matter how thin you slice it, it still contains the ingredients of that bread. And say staccato notes are the same way. You take a whole note, and no matter how you cut it up, no matter how short that note becomes, it should have that same nice tone quality that you would have on a longer note. John Painter, who was the director at Northwestern for many, many years and had a real strong presence in particular at the Midwest International Band Clinic in Chicago, once said that he believed that the most valuable person alive was the elementary or junior high band director who was inspired, who was inspiring, and produced great results. And I agree with them fully. If that fits you, if you're in that category, you're doing a wonderful job, you're valuable. Keep it going.